Hi, welcome to Bloom Podcast. I'm Courtney. I am a mental health nurse turned life coach.
And I'm Sydney, a certified Canadian counselor. Together, we're going to be discussing all things mental health and counseling.
We hope you join us. Hey everyone, welcome to Bloom Podcast. Today we are going to be talking about sort of the anti-boundary setting and really just some tips, hopefully, and some strategies to survive the upcoming holiday season.
Yeah, because I think we were just chatting and, we noticed that everything we see when we're online in regards to meeting with family and hanging out with people that we don't normally see is in regards to boundaries. And boundaries are really great.
Yeah, super important.
Yeah, but not every single situation needs a boundary. Even if there is a boundary to be had, you might not necessarily deem that moment as the moment to put that boundary into place. It might be a conversation for another day. You might want to discuss it with a close friend and kind of figure out a game plan, whatever it might be. There might be times throughout the holidays where you need to get through an interaction or, make it through interpersonal challenges without necessarily boundary setting being your one and only thing in your toolkit.
Yeah, I just feel like everything I've seen come, especially, so I'm in the States and we just had Thanksgiving, which is a really big deal here.
Mm-hmm.
So everything I was seeing, and now like Thanksgiving rolls into Christmas, right? Now we're full blown. We're all in the holiday season. So everything I saw was like, get ready to set your boundaries going into the holiday season. And like, this is what you need to do. And setting boundaries protects yourself and this and that. And all I could think about was that like, setting boundaries is scary and it's vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of consequences, not to like steer you away from it, but there's a lot of consequences that could arise when we're setting boundaries. Because if this is family or friends, whether we see them occasionally at holidays or we see them more often, if we're presenting ourselves in a different manner, they're going to have a response. And a response that we cannot control.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if everybody's ready for that, right? Like, do you want to make things awkward with Aunt Ginny and have tension for a 5-hour evening and you're not going to see her for another year?
Mm-hmm.
Or do you want to learn some skills to get through that? And like, not one is not necessarily better than the other.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes we can feel like there are moments where we're going to feel like this is a boundary, this is a hill I'm willing to die on. Mm-hmm. And then there are also times where it almost feels like I should be, in quotations, setting a boundary here, but I just don't feel up to it, or I just feel like I don't really want to deal with this person's reaction to that boundary at that moment. And I think it's really important to say, like, it's okay to know that something bothers you without always having to set that boundary.
Yeah, and I think that's a point, right? And it's like you said, Sydney, it's picking your battle, right? It's like, is this something you're really passionate about? Is this the hill that you want to die on or live on or thrive on? But and when I say there's consequences, I don't necessarily mean in a bad way, right? Like, but it's like, what is that? It's like every action has a reaction. What's that?
Yeah. Yeah. Like every action has an equal and opposite reaction.
That's the one. Yeah. So like the people around you are going to have a reaction. And I know for me personally, some of these people that I'd like to set boundaries with, I know them so well that I know that my efforts would just make me more frustrated because these particular people aren't going to change. So like for me personally, I just use different coping strategies to get through those specific interactions because these individuals are stubborn. they're stuck in their ways, and it's just not worth it for me, right? And I would be more upset because I would perceive myself as maybe failing. I would feel silly by putting myself out there, and I would make it awkward for everyone. And there's other people that I will set boundaries with. But yeah, I think, yeah.
The other thing that I notice for myself, at least, when I hear that phrase, like, get ready to set boundaries at Thanksgiving and at the holidays, I think sometimes that can kind of put us in a mindset where we're already on the defense. And instead of coming into an event, maybe prepared for a certain family member that is always a certain way. But more than that, I think sometimes it can put us in a state of mind where we're almost like on edge in advance, waiting for someone to say something so we can pounce in with our boundary.
It's like you're going in guns blazing, right? And like,
yeah,
you're kind of just it's like, it's all that's on your mind, and you're just waiting for that opportunity to like strike. Mm-hmm. And that can have a lot of pressure on you. And it can kind of take away from what the holidays are supposed to be all about.
Well, and not just that, but when we talk about like active listening, we talk about like hearing what the other person is saying instead of like thinking what you're going to say and being prepared with your rebuttal. And I think that can kind of be true with boundaries. If your ears are like attuned to that ant that's going to cross that boundary, you might miss the context, you might misconstrue something, you might, put more emphasis on something than really needs to be because you've been waiting and watching for that one cross of the line. When if maybe you weren't in that mindset, I think that you might, not always, but there might be more instances where you might be able to say, yeah, this one piece of that sentence wasn't okay, but on the whole, this isn't a big thing I need to make into a boundary.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. And I think, again, like, there's a time and the place that will feel right. And I think maybe part of the message is just that this kind of come up more organically when you're self-aware of your values and your intentions, rather than it being the focus of an event. Mm-hmm. Or situation.
Yeah, like if you kind of know what matters to you and what's most important, there might be times that a boundary like naturally comes up, but maybe you're not waiting in the wings to set those boundaries.
Yeah, and I think that's like, I really want to emphasize that boundaries are important.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's just like, we don't need to. I just picture like coming, like kicking down the door, just waiting to set those boundaries with like the pie in your hand and ready to drop it or something. I don't know. That's my vision. That's my weird vision.
I think sometimes this has just been, I guess, like my personal observation in our society is I see so much black and white. Everything is all or nothing. You're either all into veganism or you're basically a carnivore. Like, it's so intense. Mm-hmm. And I think that translates to so many different areas of our lives and so many different areas that we see online. And I think boundaries is one of them. I see it especially maybe in like parenting stuff, set those boundaries. Don't let Aunt Sally give your kids sugar. And that's totally okay. If you don't want your kid to have sugar, you can say no. Mm-hmm. But also when your whole focus becomes zeroed in on setting boundaries, you miss so many other things. And so I think for me, when I think about boundaries are a part of a relationship. They're part of an interaction. They're part of maybe a family gathering. But in having balance, there also, for me at least, needs to be other skills in my toolkit beyond just being prepared to set a bajillion boundaries.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think balance is really the key to life. Just throw a big net out there.
I mean, if you've listened to our values episode, you would know that Courtney values balance a lot. But I agree with you. I think that balance, at least for me, and I think for a lot of the clients I've seen, when we are not in that all or nothing thinking, we are able to make choices that fit our family, that fit our values, that fit what we want without being really concreted into one specific thing. We can flex and blend and make choices in the moment.
Yeah. So I think, Yeah, that's a really good point. So I think like maybe helpful for people is just kind of, if we're not setting boundaries and we have people that kind of tick our nerves a little bit, what are some things that we can do to survive either difficult individuals or maybe difficult situations?
Yeah, like how are we getting through these interpersonal challenges beyond boundaries?
Yeah. So like for me personally, I know the people that trigger me. So I know going in that like Aunt Sally's a sweetheart and I want to sit beside her because it's enjoyable. And I know that other specific people just push my buttons, right? Like they just say things or bring up topics that I'm not down with. So I mentally prepare myself that like so and so has not changed, and I just set my expectations. So like I'm not going in thinking this is going to be the best Thanksgiving ever and it's just going to be harmonious and beautiful. I go in thinking like this person I don't want to spend too much time with. If they bring up this topic, I'm just going to veer, right? I'm just going to smile and nod. Because just because I smile and nod doesn't mean I agree with them, right? It just means that I'm getting through. So because I know that they're so stubborn or they're so stuck in their ways that it's just not worthwhile. So I just mentally prepare myself and I tell myself that like they are who they are. I don't control them. I respect them. And I don't know, that's kind of how I get through, is just like I respect you as an individual, but I don't agree with you. For me to get through this, I just know going in who I want to spend time with, who I don't want to spend time with, who I want to keep superficial with, who I maybe want to go a bit deeper with.
So it sounds like you're really doing the work before you're going to the event. You're kind of, and you're doing the work beyond just like, you know, we talked about lots of things that we're seeing are saying, you know, get ready to set your boundaries, but you're doing more work than just getting ready to set boundaries. You're aware of how much time you're planning to spend with people that are tougher. It sounds like you even kind of have an exit strategy for conversation topics, or maybe even like if it's getting to be too long of a time span with somebody.
Yeah, I tell my husband that like there's people I just like I have to put a leash on him too because I feel like we're kind of a pair and he's a lot more vocal than I am and I can kind of brush things off and be like whatever, but he's going to stand his ground. So like I prepare him as well that like this is what I need from you, right? Like husband, I need you to not engage with this particular person and I need you to walk away and that's what I need from you to get through this.
Yeah. So it sounds like you guys go in with a game plan.
I would say so, yeah. I mean, does it always work perfectly? No.
But you're two humans dealing with other humans, right? Like that's just going to be the reality.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think for me, mine is a lot more in the moment, and even maybe beyond the moment. I think mine is a little bit more reflective. I think I'm pretty good at not saying things if something bugs me and I don't want to say it. Like I work really hard if something is bothering me and I want to address it, then I work really hard to do that in that moment. But if I want to let something go, I also work hard to do that. But I think for me, I also do a lot of reflection of, you know, if I know someone is challenging for me, sometimes that can mean that I take something really benign and kind of pile on to it.
Oh, yeah.
So that might look... So for me, I think sometimes that looks like, okay, what are some of the other possibilities? You know, did this person really mean it that way? Or what else could explain this behavior? What else could explain this comment? And also in that, acknowledging that however I felt, it was still valid. So even if that person didn't mean anything by their comment, still acknowledging that it bothered me, it annoyed me.
Yeah.
And so I can hold both of those things at the same time. That maybe there's another explanation for their behavior. Maybe they really meant nothing by it and they just didn't think, or that's just how they communicate. And that communication style is challenging for me. At the same time, holding that those feelings I have, whatever they are, still are valid and I still get to feel them and honor them.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point. And it just goes back to how powerful our thoughts are, right? Because when we have a negative experience, whether it was meant to be negative or directed at you in a negative way, when we feel that and we interpret that, then we kind of get in that negative spiral, right? and
Mm-hmm.
we will pile things on, and we'll start picking out like everything that that person did that evening and in the past. And it just like, it'll just pile up, and that can put you in a tailspin. So I think it is important to do that reflection piece, because we don't know what other people's intentions are, right? And I truly believe that most people aren't malicious in their intentions, and
Mm-hmm.
especially not malicious like towards you specifically or towards me specifically, right? I think they're just likely passionate or unaware or whatever it might be. And the same holds true when you change that mindset, right? Like we've talked about challenging our thoughts when we're in that position, and just asking yourself, like, did they mean to hurt my feelings?
Mm-hmm.
If we can just kind of put an end to it there, my feelings are still hurt, but it's easier to move on from that.
Yeah. And I think that can even bring you to a place where you get to say, you know, when you're reflecting on this relationship, you get to say, is this a person where our relationship can be bettered by me bringing this to them? And maybe it's after the fact when you're not in those feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're doing that reflection, you think, you know what, this person, I think our relationship can be bettered if I did share how I felt with them, then that's where you get to go back and do that, right? You know, maybe it's after the holiday, maybe it's after the family gathering. You get to say, hey, you know, I just wanted to come back to you because I value our relationship and I value you. And I just want you to know that when you said this or when you did this, it really bothered me. And I care about you and I care about this relationship, and that's why I'm sharing this with you.
Yeah, and that's such a good point. As you're saying that, I'm just thinking like, wow, these conversations are so much easier to have with friends than they are with
Mm-hmm.
family members. Like for
Mm-hmm.
me, setting boundaries with friends, acquaintances, coworkers, etc., is so much easier, because it's kind of like, well, if this relationship can't survive this, then that's just telling of maybe this is coming to a natural end. Maybe our relationship is in a different level, right? Like I think you can have different levels of friendships. And it's like maybe this one takes a notch down, maybe this one takes a notch up. But when it comes to family, it just feels so different.
Yeah, the stakes are higher, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think no matter what, to lose someone from your life, there's always going to be pain, but that fear of rejection or that fear of loss is so much more magnified with family generally.
I'm speaking as an introvert who has like not a friend group, but just individual friends. So I'm like, it doesn't necessarily affect a whole, right? Whereas when you do this in a family, like there's a ripple effect, and it could be really positive, right?
Mm-hmm.
It could be a conversation. It could really enlighten somebody. They could have kind of an awakening of their own, and it can be so great. But on the other hand, it could go the opposite way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think we're speaking from a place of privilege, even that we have wonderful families that we worry about that.
A hundred
You know,
percent.
I think that there are probably people out there, there are lots of people out there that would consider their friends their family, their chosen family. And for them, you know, to have that family member cut them off, no biggie.
Yeah,
That relationship was really crappy to begin with. But to be rejected by someone who they opened up to and a friend is so much more painful for that person.
yeah. No, that's such a good point, because yeah, lots of us,
Yeah.
lots of us have distanced ourselves from our family because
Mm-hmm.
it's just they don't fit with us.
Yeah, there's all kinds of reasons why someone might not be in contact with their family. But I also think no matter what, there's always going to be people in your life who matter so much that it feels scary to consider rocking the boat or to consider setting a boundary or to consider coming back and letting them know how you felt. And that's again I think where you get to reflect of what your values are, what matters in that moment, and there's no wrong answer, right? Like if what matters in that moment is keeping the peace, which ultimately is going to keep your peace, you get to make that decision.
Yeah, 100%, right? And like, if this is the time where like this crap has been going on for 15 years and I'm over it and I don't want to do this one more time,
Yeah.
then it's your time, right? Like,
Yeah.
and take that opportunity and do what you need to do to survive, to get through.
Yeah, I think that's a big part is giving yourself the space to make decisions on relationship and not give yourself guilt and shame over it.
Yes.
Whatever you choose when you're going through these challenges interpersonally, whether it is to keep the peace, to set expectations and mentally prepare and go in a way that keeps your inner peace so you can survive, whether it's to come back around to somebody and say, hey, what you said really hurt my feelings and I value this relationship and I don't want us to continue this way. Whether you decide to set a boundary and say, this is not okay, you can't continue this way, or whether you decide, I don't want this relationship in my life anymore. I think giving yourself the space to make those choices and to not reflect in a way of like, I should have set a boundary.
Yeah, and I think that's really the message that we want to deliver is that don't feel like you have to set a boundary in every situation, but definitely feel like you can and
Mm-hmm.
prepare yourself for that instance as well, right? And I think not that we're going to get into today, but like communication and delivery, you talked about, Sydney, like active listening, having those skills to actually have that conversation in a way that is like thoughtful and in a way that is productive is like a whole other skill set.
Yeah. And so I think, when we're thinking about having some of those conversations, like some other pieces to consider is, a lot of people, the holidays are really challenging. And, even somebody who I know quite well made a comment a while back, just that like, the holidays are really hard for them. And I never would have guessed that. They are someone who goes above and beyond to make sure everyone's having a good time. They can sometimes be challenging, but they're also someone who very much cares about a lot of people. And so for them to say that the holidays were really hard for them was really surprising. So there's a lot of reasons why the holidays could be hard for someone. And sometimes that might come out in them being more challenging to us.
That's such a good point. And because like I call myself a little bit naive sometimes because anytime somebody does something that maybe triggers me or sets me off, I always place it back on them and like they're probably having a bad day. They're probably stressed out. They're probably this. And we don't know what other people are going through, right?
Mhm.
And I'm just thinking, you mentioned that, Sydney, and I'm just thinking like we've had some health issues and not in my immediate family, but in my extended family, we've had kind of a series of health issues. And over a COVID pandemic, there's kind of a lot more factors involved with visitations and who people want to be around and all that kind of stuff. And I know like there's just so many conversations where people are on edge and we feel like people are acting in different ways than they were. And I just think about like, you have a sick family member in the hospital, of course you're not going to be at your best, right?
Mhm.
And it doesn't need to be somebody in the hospital. I mean, we're all going through stuff, I think. And that can come out in different ways.
Yeah. Yeah. And so sometimes part of managing and navigating those kind of really tough people in our life, sometimes that just looks like giving them the benefit of the doubt or giving them some grace And I
Yeah.
think sometimes we might think, well, they don't deserve it. But it also can come back to, I mean, everyone deserves a little bit of grace, but also does giving them that grace preserve our peace? Does giving
Yes.
them that benefit of the doubt give us more relaxing time with our family without being so on edge?
Yeah, and I
You
think
know?
I think a good way to navigate that is just think about that person on a whole, right? So like if they're more on edge or if they're acting different, I think it's important to reflect back, like you were talking about, Sydney, but more in a relationship kind of way. Reflect back on like some of the positive interactions you've had with them, and
Mm-hmm.
I imagine there's been good interactions with most people. So just kind of
Mm-hmm.
reflecting on, is there a change? Is something different? Something might be going on. And I know for me, that's super helpful to like just assume, you know what? I don't even know. But for my own peace of mind, if I have an experience with a bad cashier, I'm like, their dog might have died this morning. That's my go-to answer. And I just forget about it, right? I don't think about it past that. And I think if we can kind of give that compassion and give that grace to other people, it can help ease our ease our own feelings about a situation.
Yeah. I think for me, the last thing that I found really helpful is reflecting, of course, reflecting,
Reflecting.
but reflecting on why does this person, habitually feel challenging for me? And for me, this reflection I've actually done with a therapist because it just felt so confusing to me. These people are people I care about, and I care about them deeply, and yet at the same time I find them challenging. And so how can those two things coalesce? How can they be happening at the same time, and how can I find peace within that? And also knowing why someone feels challenging can sometimes, like you said, when people trigger you, you know what topics to avoid. Someone else might not necessarily have that on the top of their head. And so doing that reflection might help them be able to identify, okay, I notice this person always talks about these subjects. And, when I really take the time, I actually find those topics really not enjoyable to talk about, really triggering in and of themselves. And maybe that's part of why that person is so hard for us.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. And I think I'm even just thinking there's even certain people who they could say the same thing as somebody else, and it just affects me more
Mm-hmm.
when this particular individual says it. So I think it's kind of that work on ourselves, right? Like you were saying, why does this particular person trigger me? Like what's going on? Is there something more deeply rooted there?
Yeah. So really it comes down to it. There's a lot of ways that we get through interpersonal challenges. Some of it is doing the work beforehand, right? Setting expectations, mentally preparing, giving yourself the space even beforehand to know whatever choices you make during those interactions are are good choices for you in that moment. Some of it's in the moment, really wondering or saying, oh, yeah, this person might be going through things I'm not aware of. Or, what other possibilities might there be that this person is acting this way? And some of it's afterwards, doing that reflection of, why is this person challenging to me? What other possibilities are there, that they could have meant behind that comment? And I think ultimately a piece of it too is, practicing letting some of that go, practicing releasing what was said, what happened, and moving forward so that that interaction, that person, that event doesn't continue following you around and impacting other parts of your life.
Yeah, I think the biggest message is just whatever path you decide, just know what your reasons are for it and feel
Mm.
confident in it, right? And you don't need to feel pressure to go in guns blazing, but you're welcome to.
Yeah. So we hope that this episode is timely for you as you maybe prepare to see some family and that maybe something has stuck out to you.
Yeah, and we hope that you can just enjoy the quote unquote magic of the holidays.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. See you next week. Thanks for listening. You can follow us on our socials, thebloom.podcast on Instagram and Bloom on Facebook. Rate, review, share, and subscribe today.
This is not intended to be taken as medical advice. Please seek medical help for any mental health needs. If you are experiencing a crisis, please go to your nearest ER.